nombre es Gabriel Gallegos. Saludos a todos aquellos seguidores de Active Ministries, en especial a nuestra comunidad latina. El día de hoy queremos compartir con ustedes uno de los artículos más impresionantes que podemos tener en nuestra tienda virtual. Te invitamos a que te quedes y a conocer más del modelo tridimensional del templo. Les presento el nuevo modelo del templo. Una de las cosas adicionales que se han agregado en esta impresión es esta base donde está de una manera inclinada a 45 grados. ¿Para qué? Para que pueda enseñarse mejor a nuestra audiencia. O si usted, al igual que a mí, le gusta ponerlo de la manera tradicional y ponerlo en una superficie plana, pues también puedo hacerlo. De esta manera usted lo puede poner en su oficina o en su lugar de estudio o en su lugar de reunión. ¿Para qué? Para que la gente pueda admirar la gran maravilla de lo que se ha podido llegar a hacer. Ahora les voy a invitar a que me sigan acompañando para mirar las siguientes adiciones que se le han agregado a este nuevo modelo. Uno de los nuevos aspectos de este nuevo modelo tridimensional son los colores que se han añadido, como el color oro, el color blanco, un café y un café un poquito más claro. Podemos mirar el color blanco en los 15 escalones que están en el atrio de las mujeres, como también en las 4 lámparas. Podemos mirar el color blanco en el misbeach, en el altar, como también en los 2 escalones que están entre el ulam y el altar. Podemos encontrar este color blanco también en estos pequeños mikvaot o también baños de inmersión que se han añadido. También podemos apreciar en el misbeach, el altar, se agregaron a color las 3 fogatas y en el centro podemos encontrar de color café más claro las cenizas del altar. Otro de los buenos beneficios de este modelo es de que los edificios adicionales, el techo puede ser removido. En el edificio sureste podemos mirar cómo el área donde el Sanedrín se reunía para hacer sus juicios, y también se ha agregado un color azul en donde está el lavacro, para así poder distinguir las diferentes áreas. Les agradecemos mucho a cada uno de ustedes, especialmente a la comunidad latina, por estarnos acompañando. Pueden ir a Jerusalem Temple Studies y buscar la opción tienda o store en inglés y luego buscar modelos del templo y ahí podrán obtener el suyo. Bendiciones y gracias por su apoyo. Shalom. Gabriel Gallegos. Saludos a todos aquellos seguidores de Hacktivac Ministries, en especial a nuestra comunidad latina. El día de hoy queremos compartir con ustedes uno de los artículos más impresionantes que podemos tener en nuestra tienda virtual. Te invitamos a que te quedes y a conocer más del modelo tridimensional del templo. Les presento el nuevo modelo del templo. Una de las cosas adicionales que se han agregado en esta impresión es esta base donde está de una manera inclinada de 45 grados. ¿Para qué? Para que pueda enseñarse mejor a nuestra audiencia. O si usted, al igual que a mí, le gusta ponerlo de la manera tradicional y ponerlo en una superficie plana, pues también puedo hacerlo. De esta manera usted lo puede poner en su oficina o en su lugar de estudio o en su lugar de reunión. ¿Para qué? Para que la gente pueda admirar la gran maravilla de lo que se ha podido llegar a hacer. Ahora les voy a invitar a que me sigan acompañando para mirar las siguientes adiciones que se le han agregado a este nuevo modelo. Uno de los nuevos aspectos de este nuevo modelo tridimensional son los colores que se han añadido, como el color oro, el color blanco, un café y un café un poquito más claro. Podemos mirar el color blanco en los 15 escalones que están en el atrio de las mujeres, como también en las 4 lámparas. Podemos mirar el color blanco en el misbeach, en el altar, como también en los 2 escalones que están entre el ulam y el altar. Podemos encontrar este color blanco también en estos pequeños mikvaot o también baños de inmersión que se han añadido. También podemos apreciar en el misbeach, el altar, se agregaron a color las 3 fogatas y en el centro podemos encontrar de color café más claro las cenizas del altar. Otro de los buenos beneficios de este modelo es de que los edificios adicionales, el techo puede ser removido. En el edificio sureste podemos mirar cómo el área donde el Sanedrín se reunía para hacer sus juicios, y también se ha agregado un color azul en donde está el lavacro, para así poder distinguir las diferentes áreas. Les agradecemos mucho a cada uno de ustedes, especialmente a la comunidad latina, por estarnos acompañando. Pueden ir a Jerusalem Temple Studies y buscar la opción tienda o store en inglés y luego buscar modelos del templo y ahí podrán obtener el suyo. Bendiciones y gracias por su apoyo. Shalom.
All right, shalom, everyone. Okay, thank you for being with us tonight. I had Debbie and I had another engagement last night, and I want to begin with asking for certain prayers. Of course, Jason Jeffords. I said Jason, but Grayson Jeffords. and as many of you know, he's got a very serious colon cancer. Please be praying for him. Also be praying for Justin Hotz. Now, we've asked for a lot of prayer for Justin over the last year with everything that was happening. He came down with a virus a few days ago. It's very similar to shingles. Has the pain of the shingles. He's broken out in rash all over. But hopefully they've given him some medication and he's going to have to wait it out. But hopefully he can get some rest and things will go better in the future. Now, tonight we are going to be talking again about the oral Torah, non-Jews and the oral Torah. And we're going to be using slides and also the projector. We'll be working back and forth on these. I've been working on this particular presentation for 4 days. And I'll say that it can be tedious. However, I think I've broken it down on how to use the Mishnah to where that it'll give you a good start and you will be able to be very productive from the very beginning. And a lot of you are somewhat familiar, but there's a difference between being familiar and knowing how to use it. I'm going to go ahead and go into my slides. And let's see. We'll have these up in a moment. And you should be able to see them. Okay. So, like I said, we're going to be talking about the Mishnah, the beginning steps in following Hashem's plan. Okay, so last week, just a real fast review. The among non-Jewish Torah observers, Christians circles, the oral Torah has a very bad reputation. Now, this bad reputation is based upon misinformation, and it becomes very, very anti-Semitic, and it's full of mischaracterizations, such as its Talmud is witchcraft, even biblical things. I don't want to say that the Talmud is not biblical, but what I'm talking about is things that are listed specifically in the Torah. I had an incident a few weeks ago where on a Torah group, a question came up about the Urim Tumim, and the minister that responded said, "Oh, this is witchcraft. Stay away from it. It's in the Zohar," and so forth and so forth. Well, the reality is the Urim Tumim is repeatedly spoken of in the Torah as well as throughout the Tanakh. It is instituted by God. It's part of the priestly garments, and it is a biblical thing. Okay. So there is so much misinformation. People will also take out of context things that they will say are in the Mishnah or in the Talmud, and they will literally be something from the Midrashim, and you've got to know the definitions of these various things in order to keep your head clear there. Why the written Torah cannot be fully observed without the oral Torah. We'll be talking about that tonight. The examples of Tzitzit, Tekelet, Sukkot, the 4 species, and Shabbat labor. Now that's just 4 of literally what we could find of hundreds and hundreds of different examples. The different components of the oral Torah, the halakha, that's the rulings on how that we observe the commandments. Agadah, that's going to be your stories, your parables. That will include the Midrashim. The Midrashim we could put in the category of legends, except that the English usage or the non-Jewish English usage of legends is somewhat different from the Jewish. Okay. Um, okay. Halakhic Midrash and Kabbalah. Okay. Kabbalah are going to be the more mystical. And which of these are legally binding? Okay. In other words, that these are part of how you observe the commandments and so forth. God's ordained judicial system, the Sanhedrin, the Beit Din, is the scriptural basis for rabbinic authority. Now, we're going to be talking about that some tonight. And we had some very good questions that came in last week, but we're going to go forward now. This is my introduction for tonight. Hashem gave 613 mitzvot. Now, that was the number that was arrived at by Moses Maimonides. Okay. They're divided several ways. First off, you have, I'm going to drop down, we'll skip the pre-Sinai and the Sinai, but we'll go to the next one. They're divided into positive. That means you shall do. Okay. You shall observe the Shabbat. You shall say the Shema. Okay. Those are positive commandments. A negative commandment, you shall not do. Okay. And so going back up, we have pre-Sinai commandments. Okay. So what am I talking about? Well, the Shabbat actually preceded the people coming to Mount Sinai and receiving the Ten Commandments and the Torah. Now, all of the various halakot, there were things that God brought out in observing Shabbat at Sinai. Okay, but the initial command actually preceded. We have where Jacob, he wrestled with the angel of the Lord. If you'll remember, the angel of the Lord reached up and touched his thigh. It shrunk, and it says to this day, the Jewish people do not eat the hindquarters of the animal. Now, they do if they take out a certain nerve, okay, but that gets into the halakha. But those are your pre-Sinai commandments. Then you have those that were given at Mount Sinai. Now, we have another term that we need to have, obligatory, okay, and not obligatory, okay? So this basically deals with a commandment that a person is obligated to keep. Now, the primary place that we have this deals with time, appointed times, moedim, okay? So for men, they are, it is an obligation to pray the shacharit, okay, at a certain time, okay? For women, they also have the obligation to pray the shacharit, but they are not restricted on the time. That's because women in raising children, you have to tend to the children as their needs arise, okay? And also the preparation of meals and so forth. And so that's an important thing when you go in to see that, okay? All right. So non-obligatory or time-related mitzvot are not obligatory for women as regarding the time, but still apply to the women. In other words, it doesn't mean that they're not obligated to say these prayers or do these actions. Okay. All right. Now, when you're reading the Torah, okay, and when you're reading the commandments, you want to determine, is this a commandment that deals with in the land or out of the land? Okay, I'll give you an example. We have the Shiva Minim, the 7 species. And these are listed for us in Devarim chapter 8, Deuteronomy 8. And these are the Bikurim, the first fruits that the people bring at the festival of Shavuot. Okay, that's when they start bringing them, depending on when that particular fruit will ripen. Okay, but the first of the Bikurim are brought at that time. Now, it doesn't apply to anything but the Shiva Minim. Okay, And it is a commandment for in the land. When you come into the land, then this applies. So if you're outside the land and you're growing grapes, you don't have to bring the bikurim. Okay. Today we can't bring the bikurim because we have no temple. Okay. But even 2,000 years ago, when there was a temple, if you were outside the land, that commandment did not apply. Okay. But if you were in the land and you were raising the sheep and meat, now, what if you were in the land and you were growing melons? Did you have to bring the first fruit of the melons? No, that's going to fall into another category that you would bring for another item. But here's the deal: we need to define what the actual commandment says. You have to define whether this is a commandment that is applied only to men, or in the other case, only to women. You have to, there are different commandments and different obligations, whether you're married or single. You have the different commandments that deal with the Kohanim, the Levi'im, and the Israelites. Okay, in other words, the Kohanim, the priest, the Levi'im, the Levites, and then anyone else outside of those two groups. There are individual commandments on what they do and when they do it and so forth. Okay. And then we have another group, the Gerim. Okay. So we have the Gerim, or the foreigners. They are the non-Jews. They're going to be divided basically into two groups, a Ger Toshav. Okay. So Ger Toshav means one that is living in the land. Okay. I'll give you an example. In Acts chapter 10, you have Cornelius, who was a Gerim, okay? He was a Ger Toshav. It uses the word phobomenoi. He was a God-fearer. Those are going to be synonymous terms, okay? But there are commandments that apply to the Ger Toshav. We have another that's called the Gerim Hasharim. A Ger Hashar is the singular, okay? And so this in the Ten Commandments, it says who observes the Shabbat, and it lists, the let me read it to you. Okay, so give me a second to get turned to it. Almost there. And turn back one page. All right. We have the commandment on the Shabbat. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is a Shabbat to the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. Okay. So what does that mean? What is the difference between a Ger Hashar and a Ger Toshav? Okay. Well, the Toshav is one who dwells in the land. That's what Toshav means. Okay. But the Hashar in the gates. The gates are another way of saying the cities, wherever there's a Jewish population. And those that have joined themselves to the Jewish people are going to be called the Gerim Hasharim. Okay. And so you always want to define when you're reading through the mitzvot, when you're reading through the commandments, well, is this in the land, out of the land? Who does it apply to? Is it a special group? Who is it an obligation to? And so forth. Okay. We also have commandments that deal with different professions, like the king. The king has a commandment to copy the entire Torah. Well, I've read the Torah many, many, many times, okay? But I've never copied it. I've certainly copied parts of it, but I've never felt the obligation that I was, as a commandment from God, supposed to copy it. But it was for the king. There are commandments for the merchants. There are commandments for the craftsmen. There are commandments for the tiller of the ground. There are commandments for those that raise livestock. There's different commandments for soldiers. I want to show you a book. Yes, here it is. I think that you'll find this fascinating. All right. So let me stop sharing real quick, and I'm going to go to the projector. And here we go. All right. Now this halakot, and this is zavad for the army. Okay. Now look at the thickness of this. Look at that. Let me show you. Okay. Now this is all in Hebrew, but I want to show you some of the illustrations in it. I can find some. Here we go. Okay. So, I'm not going to read this or whatever, but you think, oh my goodness, that looks like a barrel. That looks like some kind of a container for storage, all kinds of things. Well, these deal with, soldiers. Okay. And you say, well, why would soldiers have different commandments? Because they have guard duty. Okay. What if the guard duty falls on Shabbat? Are they exempted? They're observant and the others have to do it? So these had rulings, okay? So we're going to have similar rulings on who does what and so forth, okay? But here's the problem. The problem is that the Torah itself doesn't go into it. It will very definitely, it's not going to be just, oh, they read a verse and they said, oh, let's apply it this way, okay? We're going to see how this works, all right? So let me stop this and we'll go back to the slides. And I have quite a few slides tonight, but I think that you will enjoy it. Okay. Now, the basis of all this, we talked to last week, we've talked numbers and numbers of times about the establishment of the Sanhedrin. Okay. Now, our first place that pops up is going to be in Shemot and Exodus chapter 18. Okay, that's where Yethro is counseling Moses, all right? And he tells him, you need to set up a court system. And God's going to tell you to do this. Well, we see that's the case, Numbers chapter 11, where the Sanhedrin is established. In Devarim, or Deuteronomy chapter 16, we have the Parshat Shoftim, which means judges. And it says, you shall appoint judges and officers in all your gates, in all your cities. Okay. Now, I want to drop down into chapter 17. It's talking about the courts. It's talking about here the Supreme Court. Okay. So the Supreme Court is called the Sanhedrin Gedaliah. Okay. And it has 71 judges. We have a second Supreme Court, which is called the Sanhedrin Ketanah. Okay, that's the lower Sanhedrin. That's the smaller Sanhedrin. That's 23 judges. Then we have a third court, which is called the Beit Din Gadol. Sometimes the Sanhedrin Gedaliah is called that. That means the Great Court. Okay, that there are different accounts of this. One will say it has 3 judges, another says it has 23 judges, but that court met on the entrance to the Temple Mount on the south. They've actually located where this was. But so this passage out of Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 17, I want to keep this real brief because we want to get into the Mishnah itself. But it says, if there arise a matter too hard for thee in judgment between blood libel, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, and between plague and plague, matters of controversy within thy gates, within your cities, okay? So all of these commandments, all 613, have degrees and elements of controversy. So here's what it says. Then shalt thou arise and go. Okay, and you say, I I wrote that at the bottom. You shall arise and go. We are commanded to arise and go. You say, well, does that mean that we have to physically appear in court? No, it doesn't. But it does mean that we have to inquire. Okay, this is the source that we go to, up to the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. Okay, and here this is where where it says to arise and go in Hebrew. Okay, and thou shalt come, and which is uvata. Okay, you shall come to the priest, the Levites, and to the judge. Now, all these guys, priests, Levites, not every priest is a judge. Not every Levite is a judge. They have to be a part of this 71-member higher court. So a certain part of the court were priests, a certain part of the court were Levites, and others were neither priests nor Levites. You would call them Israelites, okay? And to the judge, this shall be in those days. Oh, now look at that. Look at this phrase here, in those days, okay? And here, that's Asher Yeh Bayamin, in those days, okay? In other words, this is a continuing commandment. It is not something, that was just at the time of Moshe. In other words, Hashem is setting a precedent that you have a matter of controversy on the commandments, then you are to go to the court. And whenever the court is, wherever the court is, and inquire. Okay, so you are instructed. This is scripture. You shall ask them, you shall inquire, and they shall tell thee the sentence of judgment. Okay, all right. All right. And now you might wonder why I mark out the words. I believe I've gotten more and more that I believe that it's absolutely essential, even in Jewish translations. This is the Jerusalem Bible published by Koren. It's available on Safari, okay? And so I want a good Jewish text, okay? I want to make sure it hasn't been altered according to an agenda of someone, okay? But here, that this is where it says, they shall tell thee the sentence of the judgment, hamishpat. Devar hamishpat is what it says there, okay? All right, so what does that mean? Tell thee the sentence of judgment. So that's going to be defined in the next part. And thou shalt do according to the sentence. In other words, whatever they determine, you shall do. This isn't a rabbinic opinion. This is a literal from God to Moshe, written down in the Torah, and you can't get any plainer than that. You are specifically commanded by God to do that. Now, does that mean that, well, the high priest has to go into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, so I now can go into the No, that's a commandment that is for the high priest when a temple is standing. And it is for a certain time, a certain day, and we find out that it is specifically at a certain time in that service, okay? And so, let's read this, and I want to show a scripture. And thou shalt do according to the sentence which they of that place, which the Lord shall choose, shall tell thee, and thou shalt observe. You shall observe to do according to all, not just according to what you think, but according to what they have determined, to all that they inform thee. According to the sentence of the Torah, which they shall teach thee, and according to the judgment which they shall tell thee, thou shalt do. Can't be any clearer than that. Okay? Again, people say, why should I listen to a bunch of rabbis that don't believe Yeshua is the Messiah? And why should I do that? I've got the Holy Spirit, because you're told to in the Torah. You can't say, I'm Torah observant. We're going to interpret this our way. Okay? This is, go and check the Hebrew out. See if the Hebrew matches the English. Oh, See if the English matches the Hebrew. That's going to be the important thing. Okay, but here's the deal. You and I are commanded to follow the commandments according to how the Sanhedrin set them. Oh, that is a biblical commandment. And let's read this. I want to show you one more thing. And I love this part. Thou shalt not deviate from the sentence which they shall tell thee to the right hand or to the left. You shall do, not deviating to the right or the left. In other words, my goodness, it reminds me of a little story. Years ago, before I believed in God, okay, I mean, I had a belief in God, and but before I actually totally became a believer, we were going to hold a function. Okay, we had a civic function we were going to hold, and in the part of Texas that I lived in, there were a lot of oil refineries, and so the DuPont oil refinery had this big civic center, and so we had a board that went to meet with them. I was one of them, to find out how much it would cost us to rent their facility for this event. And so there was 3 guys, and one of the guys said, "Well, it's not going to be less than 300." And the second guy said, "Well, it won't be over 300." The third guy said, "I don't know." And we said, "Wait a second, if it's not below 300, but it's not above 300, then we have our cost." Okay. And so here, you shall not deviate to the right or to the left. Now, let's say that you're observing Shabbat. What does that mean to you? It means that not how you interpret that we observe the Shabbat, or we observe Rosh Hashanah, or we observe Yom Kippur, or how we prepare our meals. Whatever the commandment, we are to inquire. We're to rise up and inquire of God through the judgments of the Sanhedrin. All right? So, let's go here. All right. Malachi. Now, I want to show you this. We put this up here. And this is a book that Debbie and I wrote. We had several friends that helped us with different parts of it. But it's called A Concise Guide to the Mishnah and Tosafta. We used to print these out and sell them. The only thing was that we sold them for actually less than what it cost us to produce them. And so now we have them on Jerusalem Temple Study. Okay. We used to sell them for like $25, something like that. And that was years and years ago. But what I'm about to read to you are the slides. And I'm going to show you. I would encourage you, even if you're not a member of Jerusalem Temple Study, become a member for 1 month, okay? That would cost you $25. But go in and download this book, okay? I'm going to show you how to use it. But there is an introduction, if I can get to it. And yeah, here. This is what we're going to be looking at, where it goes into the Halakha, Agadah, Midrashim, the different aspects of the oral Torah, and the Mishnah. Now tonight, we're going to be talking, probably tonight and for several weeks, we're going to be talking, because my desire, my goal is literally to teach you how to use the Mishnah effectively. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our slide and we'll go through it. All right. Halakha is a word that has come to denote law, but it actually stems from the Hebrew word holech, which means to walk. Therefore, halakha means how one walks. It is part of Jewish literature, stemming especially from the Talmudic and later periods. It deals with religious, ethical, civil, criminal law. Halakha is defined in some sources as everything that is not Agadah in the strictest sense. Now, Agadah is going to be stories, okay? In the strictest sense, it may mean the abstract formulation of Jewish law as opposed to Midrash, which is going to be the Agadah, which is always presented together with the biblical verse from which it is derived. Judaism recognizes a constant development through the years of the halakot. The traditional basic conception is that of laws given to Moshe at Mount Sinai. Within the halakha, there are several different categories of authority. The highest authority are those which are specifically mentioned in the books of the Torah. Okay, so we're going to have levels to Jewish law. So your highest authority is a scripture that is found in the Torah. Okay, next in importance are those laws that are derived from an interpretation of the written text of the Torah. In order to do this, there's certain rules of interpretation called midot. Now, you might know the word midot from measurements like of the temple, okay? But it's also how we study scripture. Next in order of importance are laws that are oral traditions considered as being given at Sinai, but cannot be obtained by interpretation of the written text. Some of these laws are later mentioned in the other books of the Tanakh and have occurred in the Targum Onkelos on the Torah. Okay, the Targum Onkelos is going to be from a few hundred years later. Tulane University has a program of studying the Targum Onkelos, and they have a database that you can go to. The next level of the halakha are those laws which employ only rabbinic authority. Now, they will tell you when that is the case. These enactments are decreed by the authorities at a given time in order to provide for new situations of life or to form a fence. They didn't have courts back when the Sanhedrin Gedaliah existed in the temple times, okay, and shortly thereafter. Fences are laws passed in order to protect against violation of an existing Torah commandment, okay? The last category comprises those laws derived from custom, which is also considered part of Jewish law. Laws that are derived from anything other than what is understood to be from Sinai are known as divrei soferim, or the words of the scribe, or it will simply be called rabbinic, a rabbinic enactment. I want to give an example real quick of what a fence is. Okay, so let's say that we've got our grandkids over, and they're small, our grandkids, we got two small babies right now, but and the kids are getting older. But let's say that Debbie says, okay, in the kitchen, nobody can touch the stove. Okay, nobody can touch the stove. Now, the reason that she's saying that is to protect the children from getting hurt, okay? We could put a fence up and say, no children in the kitchen, okay? And so basically a fence is designed to be able to keep someone from breaking the rule. Don't touch the stove, okay? All right. So let's go back to the slides. All right. Among the works of the Oral Torah, the easiest to acquire and the most important from the aspect of temple studies is the Mishnah. Early in the first century Common Era, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel began to assemble written collections of what were called halakot. These halakot were the oral rulings that had been handed down through the ages. Several different collections are known to have existed at this time, but with no uniformity between one collection and another. Now, I want to show another commandment that we have, and I'll stop. We'll go from that slide back to the projector as soon as I get the turn there. And I want to show you there's this concept that the rabbis just decided to make up all these rules, okay? And what I want to establish right away is that's not the case. This rather was commanded by God, okay? All right. So let's stop sharing over here with the slides. And we're going to share the stone to knock. All right. So here, let me raise it up a little bit. This is, okay, so we're going to go down here to verse 10. You, son of man, this is Ezekiel, chapter 43. Tell the house of Israel about the temple. Let them be ashamed of their iniquities and calculate the temple's design. If they become ashamed of all that they have done, then make known to them the form of the temple and all its designs, its exits, its entrances, all its buildings, all its forms, all its laws, all its designs, all its teachings, and write all this down before their eyes so that they may safeguard its entire form and all its rules and fulfill them. That is another aspect of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is going to be recording the halakot, but it also records all the laws of the temple and all the ceremonies of the temple. Now, one thing that I'm going to just give you a verse. We're not going to turn to it for the sake of time. First Chronicles chapter 28, starting in verse 11, reading through verse 13, and you find out that the services within the temple were given by a tavnit, a blueprint by the Spirit of God to King David. Okay, an earlier one was given to Moshe, and so what was done in the temple was directly from God, but they were required to write this down. That is going to be one of the aspects of the Mishnah. Okay, so let's stop sharing that, and we're going to go forward. All right, after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, in 70 Common Era, Rabbi Akiva set out to bring a standard to this confusion. He collected various halakot and edited these into two works, selecting for his collection certain halakot and discarding others. One was a concise collection, while the other was an expanded version. In the earlier halakot, usually there was discussion as to how a ruling had been reached. Rabbi Akiva did away with the discussion or how it was reached and presented the halakha in short, clear, and explicit form. He also established rules as to the format of the halakot. Following Rabbi Akiva's death, his two foremost students, Rabbi Meir is one of my favorites, and Rabbi Nehemiah, continued his work. The concise edition, now known as the Mishnah, became the project of Rabbi Meir, while the expanded version, the Tosafta, which is actually smaller in content, but it's expanded over things that we have in the Mishnah, became the work of Rabbi Nehemiah. Rabbi Meir further edited Akiva's work, and Rabbi Meir's Mishnah became the foundation for the final editing of the Mishnah by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi around 200 Common Era. Now, I want to go back and go over this point again. He did away with the discussion of how it was reached. The earlier versions had that, and presented the halakha in short, clear, and explicit form. Okay? Now, I want to stop for a moment. apparently I wasn't sharing. So we're going to share that because it's important that you see that. All right. So let's start here. After the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash in 70 Common Era, Rabbi Akiva set out to bring a standard to this confusion. He collected various halakot and edited these into 2 works, selecting for his collection certain halakot and discarding others. One was a concise collection. That's what we call the Mishnah. While the other was an expanded version. In the earlier halakot, usually there was discussion as to how a ruling had been reached. Rabbi Akiva did away with the discussion of how it was reached. It presented the halakha in short, clear, and explicit form. He also established rules as to the format of the halakot. Okay, and it continues. The rest of it you can read. I'll read it real quick. Following Rabbi Akiva's death, his 2 foremost students, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Nehemiah, continued his work. The concise edition, now known as the Mishnah, became the project of Rabbi Meir, while the expanded version, the Tosafta, became the work of Rabbi Nehemiah. Rabbi Meir further edited Akiva's work. Rabbi Meir's Mishnah became the foundation for the final editing of the Mishnah by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in 200 Common Era. Primarily, today, Jews will study Mishnah early in their life, okay? But they graduate from that to Talmud. I do not recommend that you start with Talmud, okay? It is going to have exactly what was taken from the Mishnah, all the discussion of how they arrived at different halakot, okay? What the Mishnah is, it's going to be concise. It's going to be to the point, and you might not think so when we go into it, because we will go into some of this tonight, but it is much easier to navigate. It is much easier to learn and use. And then once you've mastered that, then you can expand up to the discussion level, what we have in the Gemara, what we call the Talmud. Okay? All right. So let's see here. In looking at the etymology of the word Mishnah, a better explanation becomes evident. Mishnah is derived from Shanim, meaning 2, as in second only to the Tanakh. It is also derived from Shinei, meaning to teach or orally impart, and was transmitted orally through the generations in contradistinction to the written Torah. The Mishnah was learned by heart, dor vedor, from generation to generation, whereas the Pentateuch, or the Torah, was mikra, that which is read. Now, we have something that happened. And while we had the nation of Israel from the time of coming into the land, the conquest of the land, which took 14 years, the period of the judges, okay, the people were in the land and they had a central center in Shiloh for 369 years. Then we go into the start of the dual kingdom, the reigns of Kings Saul, David, and Solomon, okay? Then, following Solomon, we have Rehoboam, and we split into 2 kingdoms. The northern kingdom called Israel and Ephraim, and the southern kingdom called Yehuda, okay? All of that until we had the northern kingdom is carried away by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom will be carried away 100 years later by the Babylonians. Now, the southern kingdom, it continued to exist, whereas the northern kingdom, it disappeared. Okay, it's the lost tribes of Israel. So the southern kingdom knew when they were dispersed, and it was a very thorough dispersion. Most of the people were out. There were certainly some that were able to hide out, remain behind, and so forth. But as a group, they were taken up into Babylonia. Okay, and so, but they knew they were coming back. And from the last dispersion, there were 3 dispersions. You think, oh, I was 70 years. That's from the first dispersion, dispersion to the return. However, the last dispersion to the first return is only 39 years. Wow, that's a generation. And so they knew they were returning. And so they were not worried about the halakot that had been handed down door by door, generation to generation, vanishing. But when we have the fall of the temple in 70 Common Era, and then followed up 50 years later with the Bar Kokhba revolt, and the people were dispersed primarily out of the land. There was always a remnant in the land, but the people were dispersed. They were sold as slaves. They were in this nation, that nation, and everywhere. And there was a fear that they would start defining the Torah, the commandments, any way they thought. That's very similar to what we have happening today in the non-Jewish world. They literally reject, oh, that's just a bunch of rabbis. Why should I listen to them? Okay, but the reality is the reason you should listen to them is because you were commanded to by God. And they were given that authority by God to define how to keep the halakot, all right? So let's go back in. We're going to do all this introduction now, but when we come back from our break, we will start getting into it, how to use it. The Mishnah contains 6 major divisions or orders. Each is called a Seder. That's the Jewish word for an order, covering every aspect of Jewish law. The first order is Seder Zera'im, which means seeds, which includes ritual laws on agriculture, blessings, prayers, the agricultural system, how to produce and dispose of the crops in a state of holiness. The next order is Seder Moed. Festivals or appointed times. It includes laws regarding the Shabbat and other festivals. Following Seder Moed is Seder Nashim, women, which discusses at length the laws pertaining to marriage, divorce, relationships, and family purity. Very important tractate, very important Seder. Seder Nezikim. Damages include civil and criminal laws and the political structure. That's where you're going to find the rules in Sanhedrin. Makot, which means damages. In other words, penalties that the Sanhedrin will get. It has civil laws like traffic laws. It has building codes. It has all these things. You say, that has to be added. It's out of the Torah. And that's one of the objectives tonight, is to show you that everything that we have in here is going to be based upon these are the commandments. And so, it was an education when I started going through the Mishnah. I'm going to guess I have read through the scriptures a number of times, a lot of times, okay, quite a few. And I was pretty confident that I knew the scriptures, that, I could just turn here and turn there and speak about this and speak about that. And then I got in and I read a volume of the Mishnah, one volume that had all the Mishnah. I read it through twice in 4 weeks. Okay, that is a lot of reading. That is a lot of reading. It was the Jacob Musner. And a lot of it I didn't understand. But I got finished with that and went, oh my goodness, I don't know anything. I thought I knew the Torah, and yet I didn't. But we're going to look at a much better edition than the Musner tonight. Okay. All right. So we have Seder Kodashim, which are the holy things, covers all the laws concerning sacrifices and temple observance, including the measurements of the temple. The last order, Seder Tahorot, purification, concerns defining things clean and unclean, defilement and modes of purification. That was my weakest area. I didn't understand the laws of purity. I got lost. I got confused. And generally, I read through them, but I didn't pay attention to them. And, you don't want to do that. You want every word of God. That's how we live. That's how we are able to move forward. All right. So each order of the Mishnah is further divided into tractates, sometimes called treatises. There are a total of 63 tractates to the Mishnah. Tractates are divided into chapters, which are further divided into paragraphs. Each paragraph is called a Mishnah or halakha. So basically, if you turn to Seder Moed, Tractate Pesukim, okay, Seder Moed, appointed times, and we're going to go to the Tractate on Passover, chapter 2, and 2:3, you would say chapter 2, Mishnah 3, not chapter 2, verse 3, okay? And so in Hebrew, the word for verse is pasuk, okay? And so this, you think, that's not so important. It becomes important, okay? It becomes important because we have a tractate Pesukim in the Tosafta. It's called Pisha there. We have a tractate Pesukim in the Talmud Bavli. We have a tractate Pesukim in the Talmud Yerushalmi. We have in the Mishnah Torah, which was much later, but a codification of all of these halakot. We have different ones that will be linked to Pesach. So when you say, Pesukim, chapter 2, Mishnah 4, then people know you're coming from the Mishnah. Okay? And so if it's Tosafta, it would be Pesukim or Pisha, chapter 2, Tosafta 4. All right. So, there are a total of 63 tractates of the Mishnah. Tractates are divided into chapters, which are further divided into paragraphs. Each paragraph is called a Mishnah or halakha. An example on Passover may include the following: order, Seder Moed, Tractate Pesukim. Just a coincidence, I chose the same tractate. Chapter 5, Mishnah 9. How did they suspend and flay? Iron hooks were fixed into the walls and to the pillars on which they suspended and flayed. And for whoever did not have room to suspend and flay, there were thin, smooth stays which he placed on his shoulder, on his fellow's shoulder, and so suspended and flayed it. Rabbi Eliezer says, if the 14th fell on the Shabbat, he placed his hand on his fellow's shoulder, and his fellow's hand rested on his shoulder, and he suspended and flayed it. There are numerous sages who contributed commentaries within the Mishnah. These sages are known as the Tananim, which means teachers. So the singular of that is a Tanah, okay? So if we're looking at the Talmud, the teachers there are called the Morim, and a Mora is an Aramaic word for the Hebrew Tanim, okay? And so it tells us which time period. Outside of the Tanakh itself, it is without a doubt the most valid source of anything that occurred during the Temple era, due primarily to the time in which it was recorded. All right. We're going to stop here. We're going to go to a break, and we will be back shortly.
Mi nombre es Gabriel Gallegos. Saludos a todos aquellos seguidores de Active Ministries, en especial a nuestra comunidad latina. El día de hoy queremos compartir con ustedes uno de los artículos más impresionantes que podemos tener en nuestra tienda virtual. Te invitamos a que te quedes y a conocer más del modelo tridimensional del templo. Les presento el nuevo modelo del templo. Una de las cosas adicionales que se han agregado en esta impresión es esta base donde está de una manera inclinada de 45 grados. ¿Para qué? Para que pueda enseñarse mejor a nuestra audiencia. O si usted, al igual que a mí, le gusta ponerlo de la manera tradicional y ponerlo en una superficie plana, pues también puedo hacerlo. De esta manera usted lo puede poner en su oficina o en su lugar de estudio o en su lugar de reunión. ¿Para qué? Para que la gente pueda admirar la gran maravilla de lo que se ha podido llegar a hacer. Ahora les voy a invitar a que me sigan acompañando para mirar las siguientes adiciones que se le han agregado a este nuevo modelo. Uno de los nuevos aspectos de este nuevo modelo tridimensional son los colores que se han añadido, como el color oro, el color blanco, un café y un café un poquito más claro. Podemos mirar el color blanco en los 15 escalones que están en el atrio de las mujeres, como también en las 4 lámparas. Podemos mirar el color blanco en el misbeach, en el altar, como también en los 2 escalones que están entre el ulam y el altar. Podemos encontrar este color blanco también en estos pequeños mikvaot o también baños de inmersión que se han añadido. También podemos apreciar en el misbeach, el altar, se agregaron a color las 3 fogatas y en el centro podemos encontrar de color café más claro las cenizas del altar. Otro de los buenos beneficios de este modelo es de que los edificios adicionales, el techo puede ser removido. En el edificio sureste podemos mirar cómo el área donde el Sanedrín se reunía para hacer sus juicios, y también se ha agregado un color azul en donde está el lavacro, para así poder distinguir las diferentes áreas. Les agradecemos mucho a cada uno de ustedes, especialmente a la comunidad latina, por estarnos acompañando. Pueden ir a Jerusalem Temple Studies y buscar la opción tienda o store en inglés y luego buscar modelos del templo y ahí podrán obtener el suyo. Bendiciones y gracias por su apoyo. Shalom. Gabriel Gallegos. Saludos a todos aquellos seguidores de Hacktivac Ministries, en especial a nuestra comunidad latina. El día de hoy queremos compartir con ustedes uno de los artículos más impresionantes que podemos tener en nuestra tienda virtual. Te invitamos a que te quedes y a conocer más del modelo tridimensional del templo. Les presento el nuevo modelo del templo. Una de las cosas adicionales que se han agregado en esta impresión es esta base donde está de una manera inclinada de 45 grados. ¿Para qué? Para que pueda enseñarse mejor a nuestra audiencia. O si usted, al igual que a mí, le gusta ponerlo de la manera tradicional y ponerlo en una superficie plana, pues también puedo hacerlo. De esta manera usted lo puede poner en su oficina o en su lugar de estudio o en su lugar de reunión. ¿Para qué? Para que la gente pueda admirar la...
All right, we're back, and we're going to get back into this right away. I would like to mention that if you have comments or you have questions, please put those up. Also, we appreciate any likes and shares. It always helps us. I want to give you a definition of the Mishnah, my definition, and why it is critical. I believe that it should be almost required reading for every non-Jew who seeks to follow Torah. Number one is it is literally the recorded decisions of the Sanhedrin on the commandments of God, which we are commanded by God to follow. Number two is that while you might think you really know all these commandments, you're going to be shocked as you go in. It will open up a whole new world. Just the reading of the Mishnah at face value, reading through it will double, triple, quadruple. No, let's take it much higher. It will increase your understanding of God's word 10 times to 100 times. Easy. And so, is it worth the effort? Absolutely. Is it worth whatever expense it costs to get a good set of the Mishnah? Yes, it's worth it. Now, we're going to go in and I'm going to show you some of the features of our Mishnah book, but we're going to go in and we're going to look at one of the tractates, just a brief part of it, but we're going to define all the various elements and so forth that are there as you go in. Okay, so let me bring the slides up, and we're going to move because we've got a lot of territory to cover. Okay, so these are the orders of the Mishnah and their tractates. So Seder Zerim, there are 11 tractates. The first is Berakot, which means the blessings or the benedictions, and we'll talk about that. That's the one we're going to study tonight, is Berakot. Peah, which is the corners of the field. Now, let me mention that these are arranged in the Mishnah according to their size in almost every case. So Berakot is going to be the largest tractate. Peah will be the second largest. Demei, which means doubtfully tied. Now that term, people go, well, what does it mean, doubtfully tied? Well, that's something that you need to understand. But notice that it's the third tractate in that order. Therefore, it's a big tractate. That means that there are a lot of commandments concerning it. Keliim, which are mixtures, forbidden mixtures. Sheva'it, the sabbatical year, the Shemitah. Okay, so Torah heave offerings or free will offerings. And this is going to deal, the Torah are going to deal with what is given to the Kohanim. Masorot, the tithes, and that's what's given to the Levaim. And it's different from what people were taught in Christianity. Maaser Sheni, the second tithe. Challah, which is dough. Okay, so that's going to be interesting as we get to it. Orlah, the first of young trees. That's in the land of Israel. Okay, and what Orlah means is uncircumcised. Okay, an uncircumcised tree. So that's interesting as you get into it. Bikurim on the first fruits. To me, a lot of these deal with the temple services, and you'll be surprised. Okay. The first order of the Mishnah contains, this is the introduction to Seder Zeraim. The first order of the Mishnah contains 11 tractates, with the exception of the first tractate, Berachot. All the tractates deal with the laws governing agriculture and farm products. This order deals with agricultural laws from the Torah. The tractates of Seder Zeraim are Berachot, Peah, Demei, Kilin, Sheva'it, Turumot, Masorot, Maaser Sheni, Challah, Orlah, and Bikurim. Now, why do we have Berachot? It deals with blessings. Why? Okay. So basically, Berachot needs to be, it's not just the first tractate of the orders Zeraim seeds, it's the first tractate of the Mishnah. Everything that we do is centered around worship of Hashem and how to correctly do that worship. And that's going to be a tremendous thing for people. You want to add to your spiritual life, study and apply Berachot. All right. So Berachot is the first tractate of Zeraim. Zeraim, by the term Berachot, a special form of prayer is understood that begins with the words, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe." Berachot explains the ritual of prayer and expounds upon three principal elements. Number one, the Shema. Number two, and by the way, we're going to look at the first chapter of Berachot, hopefully tonight, and go through it. And we're going to be using the Kahati Mishnah. I highly recommend, if you are going to purchase a Mishnah, I would recommend first and foremost, hands down, the Kahati Mishnah. It is fairly easy to learn how to use. It has a glossary with it. There's going to be a lot of terminology, but we'll see how it's laid out and why I believe that it's for the beginner. It's the best you can get. Okay. The Shema, Tefillah, which is our prayer, and Berachot are blessings. The tractate is also found in the Tosefta. Berachot is also found in both editions of the Talmud, the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. The tractate is built around the following passages. Now, I want to show you out of the book. So let me get the book here. And let me turned to the page. Give me just a second. All right. So what I did, you see, it's going, these are the passages that the, wait a minute, let me share this. Okay, so this is mine and Debbie's book, The Concise Guide to the Mishnah and the Tosefta. So these are the passages that it's going to deal with, okay? In other words, that they're going to make rulings on, they're going to explain things. This is where the halakot comes from. Devarim 6, 4 through 9. Now look at this list, okay? Look, Numbers, Psalms, Leviticus, Psalms, 1 Kings 8, two passages there, Leviticus 19. Okay, so one of the things we're going to stop sharing, and we're going to go back to the slides in just a second. But people say, this is all rabbinic tradition and everything, but it is a legal document and it is specific. It will give you all the various passages. Now, I told this story last week. Next week, I'm planning on having Debbie up here with me to help me. But I have read through the Mishnah twice. I told you that. Okay. But it had no commentary. A lot of it I didn't understand. And, but it was blowing me away. I mean, it was, to read, I mean, this book is that thick. Okay. And to read through that twice in a month is like, how could you do that? It's the kind of book that you couldn't put down. You just had to read. You had to turn the page to see what's next. Okay. And even though I only understood maybe 25% of what I was reading at that time, it was blowing me away. So that led to the decision to write this book. And so, I mean, it was so good that I just had to, I had to get in there. I wanted to share it with people. And so I started, I thought, I'll be able to knock this out in a few weeks. It didn't work that way. So after about a month of writing, I asked Debbie if she would take and write the tractate on Nashim, on women, the Seder Nashim. And she said, okay. And so it ended up that she did Nashim, Nezikim, and possibly Torah. And I did Zeraim and Moed and Kodashim. Okay. And so every night we would talk about what we had been reading, what we had been studying, what we were writing down. And we had said, hey, we find something we just disagree with. We think they messed up. We're not going to put that in here. Well, it didn't take long. And we were talking and we said, have you found anything that you didn't disagree with? Now, I got to be honest. There were things that I did disagree with, but when I read the passages, that they weren't just taking one passage out of context. They had other passages that started defining things. Oh, just like in a court. Just like, everything has an order. And there were things that I wasn't making the connection between, but when you made that connection, whoa. And then we're dealing with things with impurities and terminology and all kinds of things that were factors in these cases. It was fascinating. But all of a sudden, the Torah was becoming this whole new book. And it was like you were seeing things that you hadn't seen before. And that's been a good 30 years ago, I'm sure. And I'm still have that hunger and desire, not only for the Mishnah, but it makes me desire the reading of the Torah and the reading of everything that follows. It falls into place. Okay, so, all right. So we're going to go in and look at these passages, and very definitely is not a matter of based upon just rabbinic tradition. So the first passage is Devarim chapter 6, 4-9. This is the paragraph after the Shema, the Ve'ahavta. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them upon the doorpost, upon the post of your house, and on your gates. Now we're going to look at the first Mishnah, hopefully tonight, okay, which is going to deal with this passage. Then, Devarim 11, 13-21. That's the second passage we read after the Shema. And it shall come to pass, if you shall give heed diligently to my commandments, which I command you this day, to love the Lord your God, to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, that I will give you the rain of your land in its due season, the first rain and the latter rain, that you may gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil. And I will send grass in your fields for your cattle, that you may eat and be full. Take heed to take heed to yourselves, that your heart be not deceived, and you turn aside and serve other gods. And then the Lord's anger be kindled against you, and he closed the skies, that there should be no rain, and that the land yield not her fruit, unless you perish quickly from off the good land which the Lord gives you. Therefore shall you lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, and that they may be as frontlets between your eyes. Okay, that is the tefillin. And you shall teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and you shall write them upon the mezuzot, the doorpost of your house, and upon your gates, that your days may be multiplied, and the days of your children in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers to give them, as the days of heaven upon the earth. The next passage is also what we do in the service. That's the third paragraph after the Shema. And then from Bamidbar 15, 37 through 41. And the Lord spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the people of Israel, and bid them that they make them fringes, tzitzit, in the borders, the kanofet of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the tzitzit of the borders of the kanofet a thread of blue. And it shall be to you for a tzitzit, and you may look upon it, and remember all the commandments of the Lord, and you do them, and that you seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, which incline you to go astray, that you may remember and do all my commandments, and be holy to your God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. Let's talk about this passage, because it says that bid them that they make them tzitzit in the borders, the kanofet, that's the corners of their garments throughout their generations. Let me tell you, if we're going to keep commandments, if non-Jews are going to keep commandments, number one, you need to do commandments that are allowed for non-Jews to keep. Number two, you need to do them correctly. It is an insult. It is one of the reasons that numbers of Jews over the ages have said non-Jews shouldn't do this. It's because they don't know, they don't take the time to learn. They're not following exactly what Hashem said of go to the Sanhedrin, the controversy. You've got an opinion, go see what they rule and do it the way that God said. Whatever they say, you shall do, not otherwise. So if you don't have kanofet, don't have tzitzit. Okay? If you don't have corners on your garments, don't attach tzitzit, because that's an insult. You say, I don't care how it's worded. That's just rabbinic opinion. No, it's not. It is legally what God set up. And so we've got a system, okay? A God-ordained system. And we are to do it. Back, if you read all of that commandment, back in Devarim 17, it literally says that those that wouldn't should be taken out and killed, okay? I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying this was a serious thing, and it's a serious thing today. So I'm going to go a little bit further. Don't make a show of it. Don't make a show of it. Let what you do, let it be before God, and let it be something between you and God. Okay? And so I'm not saying that you can't wear the tzitzit on the outside. Okay? What I'm saying is don't make a show of it. Look how super holy and super religious I am. Okay? And so it shall be to you for a fringe, okay, for a tzitzit, that you may look upon it. Okay? And people say, oh, you have to wear them outside. Well, let me tell you something. If you're wearing it on the outside so that you can look at your tzitzit, then first off, you're going to run into a lot of walls, trip over rakes. You're going to have skateboards, disasters, whatever, because you're not watching where you're going. Okay? When it says that you may look upon it, in Hebrew, the word means know of its presence. Okay? And so, remember all the commandments of the Lord your God and do them. Okay? That you may not seek after your own heart and your own eyes. So you need to have, what did the sages say about all this? Okay. So we have Psalm 119, 164. 7 times a day I praise you because of your righteous judgment. Deuteronomy 23, verse 11. If there is among you any man who is not clean because of uncleanness that chances him by night, then shall he go out of the camp, he shall not come inside the camp. I wonder what that means. If any man's semen goes out from him, then he shall wash all his flesh in water and be unclean until the evening. Leviticus 15, 16. He's called a Baal Kiri. Okay. And so I'm going to show you how that you can look up that word in the glossary of the Kahati Mishnah and get the definitions. All right. Shemot 23:25, and you shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of you. And Bamidbar 28:3-4, and you shall say to them, this is the offering made by fire, which you shall offer to the Lord, 2 lambs of the first year without spot, day by day, for a continual burnt offering. 1 lamb shall you offer in the morning, and the other lamb shall you offer at evening. Oh, this is what we call the Tamid. Numbers 28. Okay. And so Numbers 28 and 29 give you the services of the temple. Okay. So the services of the temple, they are going to be what we do for our morning prayers and our afternoon prayers. And then on Shabbat, our additional prayers. Okay. Everything is set there. But you see, the court is literally taking the passages. Everything in the law is going to be built upon the Torah. All right. This is Vayikra 6:2. Command Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the Torah, the burnt offering. It is the burnt offering because of the burning upon the altar all night to the morning, and the fire of the altar shall be burning in it. From Tehillim 55:18, evening and morning and at noon, I pray and cry out loud, and he hears my voice. That's the services. And listen to the supplication of your servant, of your people Israel, when they shall pray toward this place and hear you in heaven, your dwelling place. And when you hear, forgive. 1 Kings 8:30. That's Solomon's dedication of the temple. Now, he's not talking about people necessarily at the temple, but he's saying, when you pray, face this place. So if you're in the United States, we face east. If you are in China, you face west. If you are in South Africa, you face north. If you're in Russia, you face south. But it is a command that we have. 1 Kings 8:48. And so return to you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their enemies who led them away captive, and pray to you toward their land, which you gave to their fathers, the city which you have chosen, and the house which I have built for your name. And 2 Chronicles 6:32, and also concerning the foreigner who is not of your people Israel, but has come from a far country for your great name's sake, and your mighty hand and your stretched out arm, if they come and pray in this house. Now, I understand I didn't choose these passages. These are passages that in the Tractate Barakot are going to be expounded on, and the halakot derived from them. All right, Vayikra, chapter 19, verse 24. But in the fourth year, all its fruit should be holy for praise, giving to the Lord. That's the tractate Torah. Devarim 8:10. When you have eaten and are full, then you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. This is called the Birkat HaMazon, the grace after the meal, when after you've eaten. People say, who's going to bless the bread? We don't bless the bread. We bless Hashem. We don't pray for the bread. We don't pray for the meal. We bless Hashem and we say a blessing before we eat, but the grace is actually said after the meal, after you've eaten and are full. From Devarim 3:25, I beg you, let me go over and see the good land that is beyond the Jordan, that goodly mountain region, and Lebanon. Vayikra 19:30, you shall keep my Shabbat and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. You see that verse? That's going to be twice, written word for word, exactly the same in Hebrew and translated the same in English. And we have two things that are on an equal plane. That is going to be the Shabbat and the Holy Temple. Interesting. All right. This is a brief synopsis of the contents of each chapter of Berkot. I want to show you that in the book, and this is how that you can use the book to help you in finding things you're looking for. Okay. So here, this is, okay. Let me reduce this down. It's enlarged way too much. Okay. So this, there are 8 chapters in tractate. Oh, wait. I went too far. Here we go. All right. There are 9 chapters and 57 Mishnah in this tractate. This is Berkot. Okay. Chapter 1, the first chapter of the Mishnah, we'll raise it up a little bit, determines the time and the procedure of the reading of the Shema in the evening and in the morning. You know, I run into people all the time, and that didn't know that there were appointed times for the reading of the Shema. Let me stop sharing for a moment. You go to a congregation, and you'll hear the spiritual leader in the congregation. This is a non-Jewish Torah congregation. And it's like, everybody stand for the Shema. Okay. My goodness, you don't get very far into chapter 1 of Berkot. And basically, it says you don't stand for the Shema, you sit. And in fact, if you open the Siddur, it will tell you right after the call to worship, it will tell you from this point, you stand for the call to worship, the Baku, and then it says everybody sits, and you remain sitting till right before the Amidah. So all this, what is called the Kiryat Shema, we are sitting. Now you say, who cares? Well, there's a message. There's a reason that you sit, because number one, it became a ruling of the Sanhedrin, and we are commanded to follow their rulings. Number 2 is that we are recognizing that Hashem is our God, okay? And you, even a Gentile king, a king of England, king of France, king of Spain, you would go in and you bend the knee before the king. So we sit, and then towards the end of that service, when we're preparing to go into the Amidah, we finally stand up, because we are now going to approach our king with our petitions. Okay, so let's go back. Wait. Yeah. Okay. So we have, all right, chapter 3. No, chapter 2. This chapter of 8 Mishnah explains the necessity of kavanah, which means attention, intention, and attention. Intention to fulfill a mitzvah, a divine command, and the necessary attention to the words read. So it's not a matter of, oh, you just recite it. You had to have Kavanah. Chapter 3, this chapter of 6 Mishnah expounds on commandments of total or partial exemption from this obligation of Kavanah. Chapter 4, the subject of this chapter is the prayer, the tefillah, the tefillah, the amidah, or the Shemoni Esrei of the Talmud, the daily morning and afternoon services, as well as the Musaf, the additional services such as Shabbat, Rosh Hashanah, and festivals. There's 7 Mishnah in this chapter. One thing that you will notice is in this book, we do not give commentary on what it's saying. It isn't a book that's designed to do that. We want you to read the Mishnah. What we're telling you is this is what this chapter is going to cover. And so that you can go from that point, you can find what you are looking for. Whenever I have something that I know it's in the Tractate Berkot, I'll pull this out, go down and find the chapter that would be most likely to be discussing the halakha that I need. All right, so I want to drop down to number 6. All right, in this chapter, there's exposition on blessings before and after eating. Also covered in the 8 Mishnah are different blessings from different food types. These are your food blessings. Chapter 7, the subject of this chapter with 5 Mishnah is the grace after the meal for a company consisting of 3 members or more. Now look at chapter 8. Differences between the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel concerning certain regulations at meals are discussed in this chapter of 8 Mishnah. Now, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. We're not going to go through all of these. My objective is not to just for us to read all. I want to give you examples so that you can see and you can apply it. Now, it just had about the differences between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Okay. When we get to the next Sefer, okay, Sefer Moed, that's the order of appointed times. The first tractate will be Shabbat. So Shabbat chapter 1 in the Mishnah, in the Tosefta, in the Talmud Bavli, and the Talmud Yerushalmi are going to expound on this conflict between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. So we learned something. Here in Berkot, it's going to have reference to the differences. But you're liable to find scattered throughout the Mishnah different things that deal with these topics. Like, for instance, the corners of the field, Peah. Okay? The corners of the field, the main context will be right there in that chapter. But it doesn't mean that it's not going to appear somewhere else and give you something that is different. So I'm going to give you an example real quick. In the Seder Torah, which means purities, okay? In the Seder Torah, one of the tractates is Parah, and it deals with the red heifer, okay? So the bulk of talking about Bamidbar, chapter 19, is going to be right there. However, in the tractate Midot, it tells us about the Shushan, the Shoar, Shushan Haberah, okay? The eastern gate of the palace of Susa, okay? That's what they call the main eastern gate of the temple, the outer gate. And it says that they led the red heifer through that gate. In the tractate Yoma, I believe it's in Yoma, it says that the Kohen Gadol had to build the bridge that the red heifer would go over in the year that they are going to offer or slaughter, not offer, but slaughter a red heifer. So you might find references all over the Mishnah. Okay? All right. So let's go back to our slides. And we'll go past all this. All right. And there is a Tosefta. The Tosefta Berkot contains more agadic elements than the Mishnah Berkot. Okay. Now, discussion is what it means. The first chapter of the Tosefta corresponds to chapter 1 of the Mishnah. The second chapter of the Tosefta corresponds to chapters 2 and 3 of the Mishnah. The third chapter of the Tosefta corresponds to chapters 4 and 5 of the Mishnah. Chapter 4 of the Tosefta relates to chapters 6 and 7 of the Mishnah. The fifth chapter of the Tosefta does not correspond to any of the chapters from the Mishnah tractate. It deals with regulations in regard to the Kiddush or sanctification at the commencement of the Shabbat Eve meal. In other words, by going to the Tosefta, I can amend my study of the prayers and the rules, the regulations, and so forth. All right. So let's go forward. We have a glossary. Now, I want to show you the glossary, how it looks. And all right. Now, this is the glossary in the Kahati Mishnah. We have a glossary in the back of the book that is based upon all the glossaries and all the tractates. So it's one master glossary. Okay. So we have the term, if you look, Amor, Amud, the Aron HaKodesh, the Or Hatuma, the Or Avot Hatuma, and the Baal Kiri. Now, just take a look, and you're going to need this glossary as you go through, because there will be a lot of things. See, it's not a huge glossary, it's easy to use, but I want to show you a little bit of how it looks. I typed some of this out for you. Actually, I cut and pasted from my book, but here we go. Now we have the Amora. The plural is Morim. Now I mentioned this, it means teachers, Jewish scholars of Palestine and Babylon. Okay, that should be of Israel and Babylon, but the country had been changed to the name Palestine at the time the Talmud was written. In the 3rd to the 6th centuries, whose activities are recorded in the Talmud, or in the Gemara. Amud, that in biblical Hebrew means a column, but here it's a lectern where the reader stands when he conducts the prayer service. The Aron HaKodesh, the holy ark housing the scrolls of the Torah, and here I think I put just a couple. The Av Hatumah literally means a father of uncleanness. The second highest degree of uncleanliness. Now look at the next one. Av Avot Hatumah. See the difference? Av Hatumah, Av Avot Hatumah. Literally grandfather of uncleanness. This was a father of uncleanness. A corpse. The corpse can convey uncleanness by touching. Number 1, vessels, which by touching convey uncleanness to man, who by touching conveys uncleanness to vessels, in which case all three become Av Hatumah, a father of impurity, which can make unclean. Hulin. Now, what is hulin? That's unconsecrated food. That means food that you eat for dinner or breakfast or lunch. It's not a holy food. It's kosher. Hulin's kosher, okay? But it hasn't been offered in the temple as a holy offering. Okay, some unconsecrated food, which becomes Rishon Letumah, and also Sheni Letumah, and you can look up those terms. Rishon Letumah, Torah can become Shlishi Letumah, 3rd degree, okay? And sacrifices can become Revi'i Letumah, 4th degree. Now, right there, in these 7 levels. You read it and you go, I have no idea what they just said. But here's the deal. The Jewish people do. They understand what these terminologies mean because they are taught, according to the book of Yehezkel, chapter 44, verse 22, I think, 22 or 23, the Kohanim, their greatest job was to teach the difference between holy and non-holy. Ben Kodesh L'Chol, Ben Kodesh, between holy and non-holy, okay? And between clean and unclean. We weren't taught this stuff. We weren't taught that it was even important. But yet, lo and behold, you're going to find as you go in, it's a major part of the Torah. And it was there. You just didn't know it was important or that it existed. Okay. So I know that you don't understand this right now. There's no way that you could. So in the start of the tractate, this is not my book, okay? Mine and Debbie's. But it has a breakdown on each chapter, which page, and it takes the first phrase of each Mishnah in that chapter. From when does one recite Shema in the evening? That's the topic of chapter 1, Mishnah 1. Chapter 2, Mishnah 1. Someone was reading the Torah. Chapter 3, one whose dead lies before him. Chapter 4, the tefillah of the morning until noon. That's the shacharit. No, chapter 5, one should only stand up, talking about the Amidah. Chapter 6, what blessing does one make over fruit? With food blessings. Chapter 7, 3 who have eaten, the grace after the meal. Chapter 8, these are the points, and one who sees the sight, and then the glossary. All right. So we're going to go just a little bit farther. This is the Hebrew. Now I want to show it to you in the Mishnah. Okay. So let me see if I can find yeah. All right. So this is where we begin. Okay. Now, everything that we've done was real important. Okay. But now we're looking at the actual Mishnah. It's important that you have the Hebrew. Now you say, I can't read Hebrew. You will start to learn. This is going to encourage you to learn. Okay. This is the English translation of the Hebrew. Okay. I had an incident a few years ago where I met with one of the top rabbis on the temple, and I disagreed with something that they were teaching. And I asked him, why are you teaching this? And he said, that's what it says in the Mishnah. I had the Mishnah with me, and I opened it up and said, read it for yourself in Hebrew. And he did. And he said, you're right. It's important that you check out what you read. Okay. Now, I turn the page and you see up here at the top, this is called Kahati, the rabbi that put together this Mishnah, and with his notes is Rabbi Pinhas Kahati. So he has where he's going to do a commentary right here. I have that broken down in slides. But then you see right here, okay, let me raise it up a little bit. Okay, so you see it has a Hebrew word right here. Okay, let me show you that word. That's going to be this word. First word in the Mishnah. And so it's going to be reciting, it's going to be talking about from when does one recite Shema in the evening. Okay, so here is a breakdown from when does one recite Shema in the evening. It is a breakdown by phrase. Okay, so here is another word. Okay, okay, and here is that word. Okay. And so this is going to be from the time when the Kohanim entered to eat their Torah. So it's taking it line by line, basically, and it's giving you commentary on it. But wait a second, on this one, we start right here, and it goes all the way through this page of where they express that this commentary is about that one sentence. And then we turn, my goodness, he had a lot to say on this sentence because it starts up here and goes all the way down here. And then until the time of the first watch, here is Od Mof, or Od Sof. I can't see it. Od Sof, I think. The first watch, and then these are the okay. So that's I want to show you. Now we're gonna go. I just want you to see how it was. Let me show you one more time. Okay, so this will take you through, and then it does repeats. You have the Hebrew, you have the English translation. This time, Rabbi Kahati didn't do any personal commentary. He's going into a breakdown straight through. Now, when you run into a problem, which you will, you have to turn to the back of the book. And here's your glossary. It's going to define terms for you. Let me show you this. In the back of our book, we have a glossary. Okay. And this was put together by friends of ours that were better in Hebrew than me and Debbie were. And Terry and Joanna Kenyon. And there's a little introductory thing, the Hebrew numbering system. And then the glossary, this is a master glossary of all the various glossaries that are in the Kahati Mishnah. Okay. And so you can go through and look up any word that you don't know, and more than likely it will be covered in the glossary. All right. So we're going to go back and we'll stop sharing. And I'm going to take it a little bit further and then go open it up for questions. Okay. So here we have the Hebrew. This is the English. From when does one recite Shema in the evening? From the time when the Kohanim enter to eat of their Torah. So you need to know what Torah is, okay? And so you need to know what time they go in to eat. That's the time until the end of the first watch. When does the first watch end? These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. That's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, okay? Leading authority of the sages on the temple. But the sages say until midnight, okay? Now, when you see the expression, but the sages say, that's your halakha. Rabbi Gamliel says, until the pillar of dawn comes up. Okay, when you see the term Rabbi, you know, hey, that's the president of the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Gamliel says, until the pillar of dawn comes up. It happened that his sons came from a feasting house. They said to him, we did not read Shema. He said to them, if the pillar of dawn has not come up, you're still obliged to read. And not this alone, but whosoever the sages stipulated until midnight, the mitzvah still obtains until the pillar of dawn. In other words, you need to do it by midnight if you can, but if for some reason you're delayed, then you have all the way till dawn the next morning. The burning of the fats and the limbs may be performed until the pillar of dawn comes up. It's taking you to the temple. And all the offerings that are to be eaten in one day, the period of performing the mitzvah, lasts until dawn. Okay, so see, it's giving us halakot on other things. You know, you watch an American movie lawyer show, and someone will bring up a precedent from a previous case. So they use these things in order to reach a decision on other halakot, other items. If so, why did the sages stipulate to midnight? To keep one far away from transgression. Midnight was a fence. Okay, but you have all the way till the dawn. Okay, so here we have and you shall speak of them. This is this is Kahati, Rabbi Kahati's commentary on this. You shall speak of them when at home and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. This verse, which appears in the paragraph beginning with Shema Israel, is the source, as the sages of the Talmud point out, of the obligation of reading the Shema twice daily. Notice it said the obligation of reading the Shema twice daily. When you lie down at night and when you rise up in the morning. The reading consists of 3 sections of the Torah. Hear, O Israel, Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. That's your first. And it shall come to pass. Deuteronomy chapter 11, 13 through 21. Well, we read those earlier. And the paragraph dealing with tzitzit, Bamidbar, Numbers 15, 37 through 41. The last section was incorporated in the Shema because of its reference to the Exodus, and also because thereto it is stated that you may remember and do all my commandments and be holy to your God. With supplements the exhortation in the second paragraph, and it shall come to pass if you'll hearken diligently to my commandments. The first 3 chapters of this tractate, Barakot, deal with the laws pertaining to the reading of the Shema, with the opening Mishnah discussing the time factor in reference to reading the Shema at night, that the Tanakh, the author of this Mishnah, did not state at the very outset that such an obligation actually exists. In other words, that it is mandatory to read the Shema is explained by the Gemara. The Tanakh relied upon the fact that this obligation is explicitly ordained in the Torah. He didn't have to put it in the Mishnah because it is explicit in the Torah. And you shall speak of them when you lie down and when you rise up, as mentioned above. Hence, the first Mishnah begins with the problem of determining exactly the period when one lies down, and the second Mishnah would determine the period of rising from sleep. All right, now, I just want to show a little bit here. We're not going to go into all of this tonight. You see, we didn't have very much more. We'll do that next week, but I want to start where we go through, and here's the goal: is I don't want to just teach you about the Mishnah. Let me see if I can find my cursor so I can stop sharing. Okay. I don't want to just teach you about the Mishnah. I want to inspire you to use it. Okay. To use it and to where that you can grow, that you can see. Now, also, I have another goal. I want to give a response to those that say, why should I? They're just a bunch of rabbis that deny Yeshua or whatever. Okay. And I want you to see what exactly this is, how that it literally was mandated by God. Number 2, that these are anointed to put this forward, that we were told to arise and inquire and then do. And so, one of the great things when I realized the Mishnah and what it was, I realized I don't have to figure everything out. I mean, that these things were figured out by people much smarter than me that knew the language much, much better than I do. And they knew the applications, and that I can take their work, which was, I believe, led by the Spirit of God, and apply that to my daily life. And my goodness, some of the most crazy things that you hear among people who profess to be believers and Torah observant, you say, man, that's not what it says, because you have seen the passages that connect to it, and you've seen why they rendered what they rendered. Okay, we're going to stop here for tonight, and I'm going to go to questions. And so, let's see. All right. I hope I have a lot of questions and good questions. All right, Jeff Fosberg with us tonight. Tim Smalley also with us. Victor Schultz. And Victor mentioned to me that he's got Mishnah Walk reinstituted, so you might check into that, okay? Janet Matters, oh, one of my favorite people. Teresa Anderson from California. Can I make it full screen? I'm not sure what it was that it didn't have full screen. Okay. All right. Kathy and Don Murray from Northern California. And Sadi Lopez, Shalom. Hashem bless you all, my beautiful mishpacha. It's been a while. It's been a while. Good to be here. And it's good to have you here. Okay. Victoria Espelita Lucas from Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and Betty Brush. I'm glad you made it, Betty. Desiree Martin, and good to see you, Desiree. All right. Los del Messias 1456, Shalom family. Sue Vasquez, I have to catch the replay. I have biblical class on Wednesday night. I know with switching, a lot of people would not be here tonight. Dan Solis. Dan, I was just thinking about you earlier today. Shalom from Plano, Texas, trying to donate. I'll try to give you a call tomorrow, Dan. I'm not sure. I'll see what we can do. And I appreciate the donation very much. Ann Shepard from Port Neches, Texas. Okay, and Open Books from Sylvester, Georgia. The Danby Mishnah. Victor mentioned this. Danby Mishnah, if you're going to do a one volume, I would recommend the Danby over the Neusner. Okay. The advantage of the Kahati, you can get a Blackman, okay, Blackman, but it doesn't give you enough notes to explain things. It gives you notes, and it's better than no explanation. But that's what I love about the Kahati is it breaks it down for you. It breaks it down to where that you can understand. Now, the Art Scroll is very good, and I use Art Scroll a lot. But the Art Scroll is going to be more halakhic. For the beginning student in Mishnah, that you have kind of worked in a little while, the Art Scroll will often become confusing to you, and they don't always explain, and usually there's not a glossary. Okay, those are things that you need. Okay, so Darren Anthony, Shalom from New York City. I'm learning Torah is mostly based on case laws of issues that arose in the ancient Near East and among Israelites themselves. And what we're talking about here in the Mishnah, it's not going to be ancient Near East. It's going to be specifically the Jewish people. Okay, I'm not saying that ancient Near East studies is bad. What I'm saying is Mishnah and what we are called to follow is what came through the court. Many times when you go to ancient Near East studies and you look at the halakha and the Mishnah, they're going to be quite different. Okay, and so I'm not trying again to knock ancient Near East studies, but I'm trying to say, understand what God instructed us to follow concerning halakha. Okay. It seems the case laws are situational and when necessary, they need to be adapted as circumstances dictate. Very correct. That happened in a big part when the temple was destroyed. You had the priesthood, their whole role is going to change. The Levi'im, their role will change. We have what people were commanded to do. More than 200 commandments they can't do anymore because they require a holy temple. And so it became very important to understand the detail of the law. And that's what the Mishnah develops for us, is the detail. Okay. In this perspective, it would seem impossible to have a written Torah without an oral Torah to interpret what needs to be done. Correct? Exactly. If we, in fact, the Mishnah is literally gigantic. Okay, all of these books up here, that's the Kahati, and these right here, and it goes down to a shelf below. Well, I believe you can say that's the art scroll. Now, of course, that's the Mishnah with their commentary, their explanation, but we really need that explanation. Okay. Questions. How do we trust questionable times? I'm thinking of the Hasmonean period and the Herodian period. I'm not sure what you mean by questionable times, but I can tell you this. There's terminology that you need to understand. It's what's called the Anshe Knesset Hagedalah. Okay. And let me see real quick. Okay. This is Pirkei Avot, sayings of the fathers. In chapter 1, Mishnah 1, tells us the history of the Sanhedrin. Moshe received Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Yehoshua. Joshua was the head of the Sanhedrin. Joshua to the elders to the prophets. Now, these are time periods. It's talking about the elders as time period. That's going to be the period following the conquest of the land, all the way up to the beginning of the kingdom. The beginning of the kingdom, that means Judea or Judah, and under King Saul. All the way from there till we have Zechariah, who is the last of the kings. Zechariah and Zedekiah. The last king of Judah, who went against Nebuchadnezzar. His sons were killed and his eyes were poked out as he saw, and then he was carried into bondage. Okay, that is the period called the prophets. And the prophets transmitted it to the men of the great assembly. That's the Anshe Knesset Hagedalah. Now, the Anshe Knesset Hagedalah are going to be mentioned frequently in the Mishnah. They are the courts that came back in the return from Babylon. So you're going to have Yehoshua, or also known as Yeshua ben Yehoshua ben you believe that I'm not thinking of his name, but give me a second. Yehoshua ben Yehosadak, okay. Remember, he was the high priest, okay. But Yehoshua ben Yehosadak, and Zedekiah, who was the Zechariah, who was the governor. They were the rulers of the land. I'm not sure which one was the head of the Sanhedrin. When Ezra comes, he will be the head of the court. All these people from Yehoshua ben Yehosadak, Zechariah, Ezra, Nehemiah, they are what we call the Anshe Knesset Hagedalah, the men of the great assembly. We have a number of rulings from them. It goes up from there, and it takes us all the way up to the time of Hillel and Shammai. Okay, so that's going to be going from the time the Anshe Knesset Hagelah is going to exist until Alexander the Great comes. So you begin a period called the Hellenistic period. It comes through that, through the Hasmonean period, to the end of the Hasmonean period. The leaders of the Sanhedrin were Hillel and Shammai. Okay, and so that's where our Mishnah period starts. They will refer back to these times. They'll tell rulings that came from these times and so forth. They'll give you the oral transmission. It wasn't written down at that time until we get up to the time of Hillel. They started writing it down and it goes forward. You want to make sure that what you're looking at is Mishnah. There is going to be a lot of midrashim that will be developed in that time, that's recorded from that time. There's the Apocrypha writings, there's the Pseudepigrapha writings. Those are not law, okay? Those you can see and learn things from. Dead Sea Scrolls, they're not law. They're valuable, but they're not law. What we have in the Mishnah is considered to be law, okay? And so the halakot falls by that. There is a term called hazal. Hazal means the sages, okay? And anytime it says the sages, it's coming like a declaration of the Supreme Court. Okay, all right. I hope that helps. But very good question, by the way. Very good. Okay, Barbara Lopez from Finger, Tennessee. Teresa Anderson, I totally agree about learning to at least read Hebrew so you can look things up. I can read Hebrew and it's helped me to really delve deeply. Plus, Hebrew has a way of communicating that no other language can imitate. Yeah, thank you, Anna. I want to be a guide, not a teacher. You're right. What do you think about watching videos online that explains the Mishnah? Depends on who's doing the explaining, who's putting out the video. Uh, the I think that you can find things that will help, but remember this: that a lot of time when a rabbi comes to teach, he's not sensitive to a non-Jewish audience that is not familiar with the terminology. And so you just going to have to use wisdom and find ones that are good. And there is nothing that will surpass having the books in hand. Okay. All right. Becky Huckabee Janelle, thank you, and thank you for saying so. Um, there is an app for the Kahati mission. It's hard to find in book form these days. There is an app. I don't think that it's available anymore for iPhones. I'll show you the app. I use it all the time. And the app, by the way, is free. Here it is. Okay, so it will come up like this. Let me share. Um, all right. So we are, this is in the Tractate Orakim. I was looking at this the other day. And so you have, here's your Hebrew, here's the actual Mishnah. It's a long Mishnah. Rabbi Kahati is going to have some explanation here. Okay. All right. And then here is the breakdown phrase by phrase. Okay. And you can set up when you get it, it's all in Hebrew, but this is the so here is Seder Zeraim, okay. Right, you get it. All right, Seder Zeraim, and here's your tractates, Berkot. All right, here's Seder Moed, and here's your tractates. Wait. So if I want to go to Shkalim, all right. So this is Shkalim, chapter 1, Mishnah 1. And I can go up here, I can pick my chapters, and I can go over here, I can pick my verse or my Mishnah. Okay, so it says Mishnah Aleph, Mishnah Beit, Mishnah Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, and Zayin. Okay, there's 7 Mishnahot in that one. But it's a great thing. And Kahati is spelled Khati. Let me show you this. You can get pocket editions of the Mishnah. See here. This is Tractate. I've used it so much it's worn off the cover. Oh, this is Tractate Shkalim. Okay. Here. This is Yoma. Okay, so you can see how big it is. But it's everything is in there, including the glossaries. And so here, this is the glossary to Tractate Yoma. Okay. And it's very short because other words have been discussed at other times. This is Rosh Hashanah and Megillah. There's 2 of them in this one. This is Tractate Tamid, Midot, in Kinim. Okay. And so you can look into those. I hate to hear that it's hard to get the Kahati in book form right now, but you can get it in. Oh, I didn't know that it would read it to you. Okay, that's all the questions we've got for tonight. Now, let me stop sharing stop reading the chats. Let me get back here. Next week, what we're going to do is we're going to develop a little bit further, tractate Berkot a little bit further. And the object here is not to teach Berkot or go into all the things, but kind of teach you the principles of how it's set up. And we'll go through some others, like possibly we'll go through Torah a little bit, just a few Mishnah. And I'll try to choose some Mishnah on topics that will kind of expand out things that you wouldn't have seen normally. And I think you'll find it really interesting. Then we'll go to Seder Moed. Debbie's going to join with me. I'm going to have her tell a little bit about her experiences in the Mishnah and how that it changed her life and everything. But people, I want to just encourage you to continue on and get ready for Shabbat. And I hope that you will grab hold of the oral Torah and that it will enhance your walk with Hashem and bring the Torah to life in a way that you couldn't even imagine. Okay? All right. Shalom, shalom, and may God bless all of you. Thank you.
nombre es Gabriel Gallegos. Saludos a todos aquellos seguidores de Hacktivac Ministries, en especial a nuestra comunidad latina. El día de hoy queremos compartir con ustedes uno de los artículos más impresionantes que podemos tener en nuestra tienda virtual. Te invitamos a que te quedes y a conocer más del modelo tridimensional del templo. Les presento el nuevo modelo del templo. Una de las cosas adicionales que se han agregado en esta impresión es esta base donde está de una manera inclinada de 45 grados. ¿Para qué? Para que pueda enseñarse mejor a nuestra audiencia. O si usted, al igual que a mí, le gusta ponerlo de la manera tradicional y ponerlo en una superficie plana, pues también puedo hacerlo. De esta manera usted lo puede poner en su oficina o en su lugar de estudio o en su lugar de reunión. ¿Para qué? Para que la gente pueda admirar la gran maravilla de lo que se ha podido llegar a hacer. Ahora les voy a invitar a que me sigan acompañando para mirar las siguientes adiciones que se le han agregado a este nuevo modelo. Uno de los nuevos aspectos de este nuevo modelo tridimensional son los colores que se han añadido, como el color oro, el color blanco, un café y un café un poquito más claro. Podemos mirar el color blanco en los 15 escalones que están en el atrio de las mujeres, como también en las 4 lámparas. Podemos mirar el color blanco en el misbeach, en el altar, como también en los 2 escalones que están entre el ulam y el altar. Podemos encontrar este color blanco también en estos pequeños mikvaot o también baños de inmersión que se han añadido. También podemos apreciar en el misbeach, el altar, se agregaron a color las 3 fogatas y en el centro podemos encontrar de color café más claro las cenizas del altar. Otro de los buenos beneficios de este modelo es de que los edificios adicionales, el techo puede ser removido. En el edificio sureste podemos mirar cómo el área donde el Sanedrín se reunía para hacer sus juicios, y también se ha agregado un color azul en donde está el lavacro para así poder distinguir las diferentes áreas. Les agradecemos mucho a cada uno de ustedes, especialmente a la comunidad latina, por estarnos acompañando. Pueden ir a Jerusalem Temple Studies y buscar la opción tienda o store en inglés y luego buscar modelos del templo y ahí podrán obtener el suyo. Bendiciones y gracias por su apoyo. Shalom.
לא שומעים!
Shalom, mi nombre es Gabriel Gallegos. Saludos a todos aquellos seguidores de Hacktivak Ministries, en especial a nuestra comunidad latina. El día de hoy queremos compartir con ustedes uno de los artículos más impresionantes que podemos tener en nuestra tienda virtual. Te invitamos a que te quedes y a conocer más del modelo tridimensional del templo. Les presento el nuevo modelo del templo. Una de las cosas adicionales que se han agregado en esta impresión es esta base donde está de una manera inclinada, 45 grados. ¿Para qué? Para que pueda enseñarse mejor a nuestra audiencia. O si usted, al igual que a mí, le gusta ponerlo de la manera tradicional y ponerlo en una superficie plana, pues también puedo hacerlo. De esta manera usted lo puede poner en su oficina o en su lugar de estudio o en su lugar de reunión. ¿Para qué? Para que la gente pueda admirar la gran maravilla de lo que se ha podido llegar a hacer. Ahora les voy a invitar a que me sigan acompañando para mirar las siguientes adiciones que se le han agregado a este nuevo modelo. Uno de los nuevos aspectos de este nuevo modelo tridimensional son los colores que se han añadido